I'm very happy to announce now the moderator of our next panel, our fourth panel here at the Munich Cybersecurity Conference, Sandro Geiken. Sandro is director of the Digital Society Institute at ESMT in Berlin. He is also a policy advisor. He is a director in NATO's SPS program. He authored the first cyber foreign policy strategy for Germany, and he was instrumental in the German-Chinese no-spy agreement. You will find Sandro also in business. He just founded the first full-spectrum private intelligence agency, Monarch. Sandro, your topic for the fourth panel, more cybersecurity through digital sovereignty. I leave it up to you to introduce your guests.
Can you move a little bit to the center of the camera?
For the kind introduction. So I'm very honored and pleased, of course, to be here at the Munich Cybersecurity Conference. Despite the digital format, I would love to be with you, Peter, and the gang in Munich now in the hotel, but we hopefully get back there next year. So I just want to briefly set the scene before I'll introduce my excellent panel we're having here. So the topic digital sovereignty is actually something that came up a while ago, and that's keeping us busy, in particular in Germany, from a number of different angles, privacy, security, but also more narrowly over the last time, the German industries. And it's beginning to become a topic of greater maturity, of greater interests. So I think it is important to understand the connection that we have between sovereignty and security. So how are the two related? I was thinking about a citation from Winston Churchill. I like to cite Winston Churchill. And he once reportedly said that the only statistics you can trust are the ones you have falsified yourself, which is a common saying in Germany. And this kind of relates to our topic because IT has a similar problem. There's a lot of state-driven interest to have hidden trapdoors in IT for law enforcement, for espionage, for sabotage in some cases. And the complexity of IT, unfortunately, is so huge, and the backdoors, kill switches, and intentional little errors are so tiny and can look so innocent that it's technically and operationally impossible to validate a system if you have not built it yourself. So maybe a cyber Winston Churchill would have said the only IT you can trust is the one you have falsified yourself. Otherwise, you will never know what's in there. And there's a big difference if you are putting something in an IT because you own it in comparison to the certainly still dozens to hundreds of vulnerabilities which are inside these systems anyway. So you could say that any state can hack any machine at any moment and plant something in there, which is certainly true. But having your very own architecture, your own backdoors, kill switches is very different from that. So this access, first of all, is legally required. So even if you discover it and remove it, it will come back in the next iteration of the technology, one way or another. And these kind of accesses are architecturally manufactured and built into these systems. So they enable very high privileges, full access, they're invisible to security mechanisms, they cannot be removed, they can switch off all systems of that brand. And that's a lot of potential power inside these systems of the state who kind of owns the technology one way or another. So in a way, and this is one concern that we're certainly having in many of the German industries, but also in the German government for many technologies that we're looking at, you could become a de facto hostage of the political will of the actor behind it. Be that in China, that you're hostage to a totalitarian dictatorship, or be that there may be backdoors in there for law enforcement from other entities from more friendly nations. One way or another, there's something in there that you cannot control. And this, of course, is not critical in all cases. I mean, consumer electronics may be the thing that we worry about most, our mobile phones in day-to-day life. But actually, a lot of other technologies may be way more critical. So critical national infrastructures, for example, military technology, economically critical communication technologies are very different because there is clearly desirable to not have the possibility of foreign access and to have innovative sovereignty over the baseline technologies as well, because you will be building on top of these technologies entire ecosystems of your own digital making. And then when you're dependent also in terms of innovation on someone else, then you're also not just having not sovereignty in security, you're also not sovereign in innovation. So at this point, sovereignty actually matters. So The question is, how can I assess that? And manufacturers, of course, will lie to you about the trustworthiness. So the main element by which to assess them is their sovereign affiliation and the nation's interests in backdoors, kill switches, and the like. And at this point, unfortunately, especially the big IT countries have a substantial interest in offensive cyber. So China, we know, is very big on network technology, but still number one internationally in industrial espionage and very big in strategic espionage as well. And on top of that, a totalitarian country. And the Five Eyes, certainly friends and acting in our interest, but they're still having, still being the biggest software producers, and they're still having a strong interest and legal requirements for backdoors in their technologies as well. And we have other actors which are not on the agenda, and I frequently like to call on the UAE and the KSA, so Saudi Arabia and the whole region, because what happens currently in Saudi Arabia with MBS in particular is the commercial construction of a major cyber power. So they're getting very, very effective in offensive cyber, may even be among the top three already, very unnoticed because it's a largely industrial effort, not so much in the nation state. And they are already in control of much of the hardware production globally. So this is something that has not been researched so very well, but they may very soon develop their own offensive interests in backdoors and in weakening technologies in specific cases. And of course, we also have some concrete discussions and cases. The biggest one, of course, is Huawei and 5G. That's a discussion that is very, very widely going on in Germany with very different opinions and a lot of opinions, because Huawei, of course, is cheap. It's technologically also very advanced, and we need a good 5G network, but our economy will depend on the goodwill of China for a long time, and we are supporting a dictatorship in a very critical technology and in a very critical phase of its innovation. But there are also smaller cases on a day-to-day basis. So one other example, for example, is the German automotive sector right now, who's looking for operating systems and is now eyeing QNX as an operating system for German cars, which is a Canadian operating system. Part of the Five Eyes may have a hidden access somewhere. And while we will not expect that the Five Eyes will abuse that in our disadvantage, it may be that this secret is kind of leaked somewhere. This has happened in the past repeatedly, and then criminals may have this kind of access. We may have lost it, and it could be a critical problem for the German cars. So it would be nice to have trustworthy European sovereign technologies for these cases, and not just technologies, also a more open and active culture for innovation, also better capabilities in critical security functions. And we would certainly have the outset for that as well. We know that we have great engineers, we have big tech companies, many of which are now building IT systems. Ironically, a lot of these very innovative entities in the United States are of the big software companies are very much trying to hire Europeans into their services, because we have very good engineers, very good education. So we could do all these things ourselves, but we're just not really doing them. So the question is, do we really want that? Where do we want that? And how do we get there? So this is a bit the background of what we will discuss today. We will ask ourselves why and where do we need digital sovereignty? Which technologies do we actually require? Who could be a trusted European supplier of those technologies? How can we build them? Who needs to create which kinds of incentives? And I'm now very much looking forward to my fabulous panel to discuss this with. I will not introduce them because I always prefer if panelists introduce themselves quickly. And I will start the round of introductions by asking, first of all, for your introduction of yourself, and then by asking also for a little definition of digital sovereignty. And we will start with Robert, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation and a very good introduction by you, Sandro. My name is Robert Kozla. I'm Director of Department of Cybersecurity in the Chancellery of the Prime Minister in Poland. Of course, our responsibility is to take care about our investment in modern digital economy. So, of course, not forget about cybersecurity aspects. Today's topic about digital sovereignty, we have a lot of discussions starting with where we participate actively as a member state, starting with federated cloud environment, the new secure and digitally sovereign federated European cloud, supporting development of modern economy, of course, take into consideration different scenarios representing different industries. This is the area where we are going also to invest from IPSAI mechanism. What's more, of course, this is a question of development, the level of development from European perspective. I'm responsible, and my department is responsible for recovery and resiliency plan in Poland for the cybersecurity component. Of course, our focus is on development of trusted cloud services based on the recent investment of the Polish government to have more resilient cloud services available for citizens and also companies. You ask about definition of sovereignty. And I think we can look at this definition, and at least from my perspective, I'm looking this as something like a controlling influence. So sovereign digital sovereignty, from my perspective, is a question of governance. It's a question of impact. It's and the way how we can influence the digital market, especially in Europe, digital single market, through facilitation, directions, and of course financing the major activities to develop this market. So I think that would be the first introduction statement from my side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Excellent definition, and we'll come back to you because you're the only politician on this panel, so you will have to take care of the politics part. I will now hand over to Werner, who I know is a fanatic in digital sovereignty. Werner, please introduce yourself and give us your definition of digital sovereignty.
Thanks a lot, Sandro. Thank you for having me. My name is Werner Strasser. I'm the founder and CEO of Fragmentic Storage Solutions here in Austria. Actually, as Sandro already mentioned, I'm a kind of fanatic about digital sovereignty, which has been made me have these kind of caps from my marketing department. Actually, of course, it is a question of, let's say, paradigms. We somehow have to synchronize our semantic understanding of the term of digital sovereignty. Of course, I agree with just about everything that Robert mentioned before. And our focus, of course, is not only to stay in, let's say, the political sphere of a definition. Actually, our goal, our approach is way stronger to make it possible for the individual, for the small, medium enterprise, for the larger enterprise, and even, of course, also for governments to have a chance, a technology-driven chance to achieve digital sovereignty by themselves and to retain it. So in my understanding, and that's maybe the reason why I'm not a politician, I prefer to trust on math and on science and not so much on rules. And so for us, digital sovereignty is actually something that is, of course, not only by technology, but in our point of view, mainly achievable by having technology solutions to enable the individual and the SME, actually the citizen, and all the larger constructs of human people to achieve this kind of sovereignty.
Thank you, Werner. And I will now hand it over to Cyril, who is a representative of a large European company.
Hello, Cyril Dujardin. I'm in charge of digital security in Atos. Digital security covers the cyber security part of it and the national security, as we see a lot of convergence, and the convergence of cyber and national security is valid not only for sovereign topic. I will not challenge the definition of sovereign. What I would say is for a large IT company like Atos, sovereignty, digital sovereignty is kind of schizophrenic because in one way, our customers are asking for the control of what they are, of their data, of their information, of their processes, of everything. So they're asking for sovereignty. But on the other end, they want to get the service, the optimal service. They want to get something that is useful for them, being in digital overall or in cyber security. And of course, the first role of cybersecurity is to protect. So they would like both to be protected, but to be protected at a level that allow them to be in control and not to be dependent on other third party. So sometimes as a supplier, we have to manage this schizophrenic view on is the medicine worse than the disease, and we have to really deal with that in our handling with our customers.
Thank you, sir. So now finally, I'd like to hand it over to Sergey, who is joining us from Palo Alto Networks.
Thanks, Sandro, and thanks for having me back at this conference. So my name is Sergey. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Central Europe at Palo Alto Networks for the last 2 years. And previously, I used to run cyber defense in one large DAX security company. And I guess, if you ask me on the definition on digital sovereignty, I would say most people agree that, in any global economy and hyper-connected world, free and secure flow of data is very important in order to stay competitive, right? So the answer cannot be that we build everything ourselves. I mean, I'm not aware of any big product in any country where everything is done just by this specific nation. And I think looking also, at the most promising digital natives here in Germany, like Zalando's, Delivery Heroes, Volocopters of this world, I think they're all as well interconnected with the digital system, right? So I guess every organization has to understand what is the true value add in the system and how to create this value add and not to reinvent the entire wheel. And I would say Mr. Schinger, he put the right challenge in his keynote on the table, really to, asking us how we create trust in the system and what is really trusted and what not. And also I like the definition of influence, trustfulness, where certainly a lot of perspectives can be given, like reliability, security, privacy, self-determination. But I guess in the end, this cloud tech, where the data is not necessarily anymore bound to location, is something where we all have to learn how to protect this data, the consumers and as well the vendors. So let me try to reflect what we hear from our customers, who are in particular very sensitive about digital sovereignty. And these customers seeking first of all for more transparency, right? So we've tried to respond to that, for example, and provide really insight on how we're driving our supply chain, how we're manufacturing chips, where they're manufactured, how they're sealed, how they are really delivered to the customers, how we check the integrity afterwards, insights on our internal security, insights on the right really to handle the data, whether the data is stored in Europe or in the US. So I think these are the first aspects which are being asked. And my definition of digital sovereignty would be, in context of cybersecurity specifically, that you have to have the capabilities to validate the trustfulness and trustfulness of the organization, but also of the technology, right? And all these transparency initiatives I've just mentioned, but also others like technical validations or even certifications. There are a lot of great initiatives like C5, ANSI, or SOC 2.0, where you can ask large vendors to provide insights over hundreds of reports, of pages actually in reports, to describe how security is being managed across these companies. Another example from the automotive sector is, for instance, that they've created or come up with a separate certification as well, which is called TSAX, which they've trying now to adopt or force as large manufacturers across the entire supply chain. So I think from their point of view, it's also part of the digital sovereignty to ensure that all the suppliers are being properly secured. So that's one view. And I think a second view is what we hear very often is that digital sovereignty is also something about trust into the technology. I think we had a discussion last year on the panel here. While we can trust an organization, I think technology remains far too complex to be trusted, simply because we are all interconnected, and there could be a lot of systematic risks which we don't understand. SolarWinds, supply chain attacks we've seen in the past are just one small aspect of this iceberg. So I guess it shows us that even the most advanced companies out there can be compromised, and therefore we in cybersecurity are always, referring back to the to a strategy of zero trust architecture. So really trying to reduce the trust as much as possible, and always verify this technology. And specifically our customers, who are using insecure technology, having a lot of technical debt, which they cannot change, they're seeking for compensating measures to, have a permanent layer of verification of such technologies, or even understanding how they can decouple that from the system by, controls like segmentation and so on. So in simple words, if you can't trust the technology, and you don't really want to change it, or you can't change it, I think you can create always successful compensating measure for that part.
Thank you, Sergey. And I think you very nicely turned back to the overall topic of the conference, which Wolfgang Ischinger already mentioned yesterday, namely trust. So trust, as he said, is the most important ingredient in diplomacy, also because you cannot really verify what's in the mind of your other nation's counterpart. But I think in IT, as you already mentioned, we also have this concept of zero trust or trustworthy. So trustworthy, that's also an interesting philosophical distinction, by the way. Trust is something that I deliver in advance as a belief in something. Trustworthy, on the other hand, is something that I can actually verify and validate. So if somebody or system is trustworthy, I can actually verify its particular characteristics which are relevant for that. So I think the question for us is, since our trust has been shaken every now and then in Europe in some of these systems and in their reliability, functionality, and some of the security aspects, are there any areas where we actually need trustworthy technologies rather than trust into a vendor? And is that something that we can generate by rules, by setting up a law, or is a law not sufficient? And do we have to actually gain control of the architecture of the technological development process itself? So this is something I would like to discuss with you now, and I think I would first like to ask Cyril what a large company like Atos where would you consider parts where rules are sufficient, where trust is sufficient, which level of trust, where is trustworthy required? What's Atos' position?
Yeah, I think from what Sergey told us, it's quite clear we have to differentiate some technologies and some level of let's say, of technology that needs to be sovereign, that needs to be trusted. But you can't rely on the sum of product to be fully, let's say, secure, trusted. So you need to really look at the overall environment, not coming from the let's say the hardware software system to have the full view. So what we believe is that you need to secure or to highlight a certain number of technology around cryptography, around digital identity, let's say artificial intelligence, which is a big word, but we need also to have some trust on it. I'm talking also about quantum, where the future-proof technology that will be at the base of, let's say, quantum-proof technology, let's say, deciphering of non-quantum-proof technology and the use for advanced cryptography. So we need to have these bases, capacity to be able to be offered to our, let's say, not only our government, because government is only one layer. Of course, the fundamental and the most, let's say, trustful layer in our world, at least in our Western world, still. But also for any company, I think we are sometimes, let's say, sometimes separating the need for let's say, government and critical site from the need of corporate. But more and more, these two worlds are merging, are converging. And we really need to, because when you were talking about a car manufacturer, okay, cars can become weapons. So it's not anymore, you can use them, you can take control of them and have them become weapon. If you are, let's say, in agriculture and using a phosphate nitrate, you can use it as a bomb, and you can, let's say, put it in the middle of a city and make it as a bomb. So no more let's say, no more separation between these two universes. So meaning we need this basic technology, then we need trusted, not trusted technology, we need trusted companies, trusted layers. Our customer are asking us to have, let's say, trustees, people that are able to build interface between this, let's say, this first layer of technology, which are the key one that we can rely on, that can be audited by the various, let's say, security bodies of our countries. Then this trusted capacity to interface this technology with the, let's say, the open world. When I say open world, why wouldn't we use the best of breed of the security of some let's say friends, some friends in the US, some friends in other countries? Why wouldn't we use this technology? Why wouldn't use the capacity of the hyperscaler to deliver fantastic, let's say, cloud capacity and transform the world we are living in digital? We should use this technology, but still we need to control this basic layer, and we need to have a trusted provider in all European providers as well in Europe, but German in Germany, that are French in France, that are let's say Dutch in Netherlands. We need to have this capacity to have these trusted parties that can make the gateway between these key technologies that we need to control and develop and finance and get our hands on, and the let's say more global players of this security world.
Thank you. So, Robert, from your perspective as a government regulator, where would you like to have your own technology? So more control over what you're actually doing, and where do you think rules are sufficient? And how do you intend to validate the rules?
Yes, of course, we need laws, we need rules, and we need standards, because we need to set the stage for our collaboration with academia and industry. Of course, in this triangle, this is the only way how we can develop the trust, already mentioned by our colleagues from this panel. Trust can be declared, but of course need to be can be declared, but declaration is not valid as soon as it's not proven by the real steps, by the real activities. So that's why, of course, from one side we have laws regarding, of course, respect to investment, respect to the rights, legal rights, and also privacy, and of course the country rights to be sovereign, the European Union to take a role as well. On the other side, we have rules where we set the stage for industry, how to operate, how to develop products, how to deliver them, how to implement them securely. At the end of the day, of course, we have best practices that need to be followed, but need to be developed. And usually, best practices should be developed together with industry. Governments are not devices and services developers, so that's why, of course, we need this partnership. On the other side, the way how we can check this trust and how we can improve this trust and really prove the trust and trustworthiness, it's starting from the softest ways. It's testing. Of course, we need to check whether the product services complies with technical specifications and standards. The second is a more formal evaluation. And finally, of course, certification. But this is ideal world, and then we know that we are not living in an ideal world. That's why, of course, in the European Union, we set the stage for Cybersecurity Act that define requirements for evaluation and certification of of the product itself. On the other side, when we look at the market from the perspective of how many products are already certified, which are the eligible criteria actually for evaluation certification, and we found a lot of gaps. Just as you referred to 5G, as you refer to the next generation of technologies, and also Cyril touched some emerging technologies that will be implemented. The basic question is how to prove that those technologies are resilient, that those technologies can be trusted, that those technologies cannot be misused. Because on one side, we are talking about rules, but the bad guys do not respect the rules. So of course the rules are for governments, the rules are for industry, the rules are for academia, the rules are for citizens, but not for the bad guys and politically or economically motivated gangsters. So that's why, of course, we should, and what was already also touched by Sergey about zero trust, and it's zero trust is more about philosophy, that we should assume not to trust in 100% of security solutions. That's why, of course, we need to talk about multi-level security. And when I refer to the definition of sovereignty, I talked about impact. I talked about controlling influence. So that's why this type of controlling influence can be set only in the direct partnership between government and not declarative partnership. Because we heard for at least last 10 years, we heard a lot about public-private partnership, but the examples of this successful public-private partnership, where government, of course, respect the rights and interests of companies to develop and to gain profits from their activities, and the industry respect the government's the right of the governments to regulate, to control, because of the responsibility of governments in front of their citizens. So the way how I would address the topic of trust and building the trust, I can provide you example from Poland, because in 2019, when we started to implement the NIS directive in our law, national law called Law on National Cybersecurity System, we consider system as an ecosystem of government, industry, organizations, and citizens' involvement as well. So we found the need to develop this type of partnership with industry, and we set the stage for this type of effective partnership with cybersecurity cooperation program. This program was announced in October 2019. Until now, we have almost 20 companies enrolled into this program, companies and organizations, also NGOs. And we collaboratively work, first of all, to introduce the most recent and the most resilient solutions, the most resilient services. We also incorporated education for users and security baselines provided by companies. So I think this is, we cannot, as I said, we cannot declare the trust without the real steps. And real steps require at least a minimum level of the rules, and then goodwill and facilitation for the effects. So that's what I wanted actually to address this in this part. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, real steps is a good step forward, I believe, and I can shift this over to Werner, because I know for him, real steps would be mainly technology. So, and I think an interesting question is, why haven't we built more baseline technologies in Europe, in Germany? Why are we not stronger on some of the technological parts when we have such a great base of engineers, a great base of industrial tech companies? And what's wrong in the market, so to speak? And which incentives do we need, or how do we have to reshape the market to create incentives for more sovereignty on the technical level?
Yeah, thanks for this question, Sandra. Actually, I think the perspectives of a European high-tech company, in our case, a rather young startup company, even though I'm in this industry since nearly 30 years now. Of course, it is not easy always to find out who has a real interest in this game. When we talk about cybersecurity, it's actually also, of course, a way or one of the aspects of asymmetric hybrid warfare. And it's maybe not in the consciousness of the broader public, but actually we are all affected by that. And of course, there are several levels to this problem. And so Maybe to start with the most obvious one, these friend-foe recognition, to find out who is your real partner. Does it change over time? And especially when we talk about political changes in all the countries and all the blocks we've mentioned today, it's getting somehow tricky. And maybe one way to better understand this is somehow the let's say historical view. And when we go back some 20 years, I just remember the former CIA director James Woolsey very bluntly and directly told to I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and then later on it was reprinted here at Spiegel and some other newspapers, that Zeit, why we are spying on you, because you are actually you are bribing, and so actually European technology is not really worth spying on it, because you are not advanced enough. So somehow at that point, this was very blunt some 20 years ago, but of course I think we still have to be very clear here that being the newest kid in town, the new bloc, the EU, actually, we need to have some more, maybe a little bit more solid spine on that. And so I'm fully aware that it makes a big difference if you are living and working in a small neutral country like here in Austria, or if you live in a larger, maybe more fully integrated NATO member country and so on. And so I'm pretty convinced that it's not only the set of skills that makes a difference in who can really develop and produce baseline technology. It's also, of course, a question of the, let's say, economic and political will to do it. And one aspect of this game, which is actually very frustrating, not so much for us here at the moment, but to see this in the last 10 to 15 years. A lot of very interesting technologies were developed. A lot of very interesting organizations actually have been founded. And when it came to market readiness, when it came to the situation where other countries, other blocs would definitely do public procurement of this technology and support these baseline sovereignty technologies, actually the Europeans used to step on their own toes, have a lot of regulations. Of course, it's taxpayer money. Of course, there needs to be a whole set of rules to avoid corruption. But nevertheless, if you have too many rules or rules that actually stop you by developing to develop things like that, it's getting actually very tricky. And just let me answer to the former question also, when it comes to the comparison between trusting in rules and regulations and laws. I fully agree with Robert that, of course, these regulations are necessary. I just want to stress the point that it is not enough. It definitely is not enough. You have to mitigate these challenges by adopting technology, adopting science, physics, math, in a way that enables you to have all the layers of protection to have a chance to achieve sovereignty. And so, for instance, just the historic example, Adi Shamir, 42 years ago at MIT, published his first paper on secret sharing, which is actually an old mathematical algorithm in the meantime, but nevertheless, it helps us protect against future quantum computers. And so actually, I think it's not so much only a question of economic situation or political situation. It's also a question of, are we really interested as a society to achieve digital sovereignty? And who probably wants to have it, who is responsible to have it, and who maybe pretends but isn't really interested in it. And so I think this is a very tricky situation. And of course, yeah, when we just think about things like the US Cloud Act of 2018, there is a lot of, I don't want to say this bad word, but there's a lot of strange arguments out there. And if you really read the text and understand the meaning, you should think about, or we have to think about, if we really want to achieve digital sovereignty, or if we should stop pretending it.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. Okay, so I have a question from the audience, which relates to what you said, Werner, because of course we know that especially in Europe, one larger problem is governments and regulations. So it's frequently seen to be a roadblock and for innovation, and something that rather complicates things than enabling them. And this fits nicely to the question that we're having from the audience, namely, how can governments and companies work together to secure stability and reliability, even to fight those gangsters, as Robert just said? And I'd like to ask that question to Sergey, especially with a look to the United States. Are there maybe lessons that we can learn from the United States over here in Europe regarding the cooperation of private and public? Or are you guys just as bad as we are?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely lessons to learn everywhere, and specifically, in the sector of PPPs, public-private partnerships. I think the US, as you've asked a specific example, invested very early on by creating certain sharing alliances, right? All the different ISECs, so information sharing alliances. For instance, the FS ISEC in the financial space, then there's an energy side ISEC, and so on. They've been created and made with a structure that both the private and public sector cooperate. And also exchange not just operative threat intelligence, but also a lot of insights on tactics, on best practices, on countermeasures, and so on. I think we do have very, very solid first steps. We went pushing as well our countries in this direction. There are great examples, again, here in Germany with, CSSA, or DCSO, in the UK with Cyber Defense Alliance, for instance, in the financial sector space. But I guess the partnership between the public and the private sector is still very, very weak compared to the US. And this has as well some other aspects, simply because in the US it's very common that you would swap as an individual during your career between the private and public sector, and by that already get a much more better understanding for the other world, right? In the public sector, things are working completely different than the private sector. I do not see this too often in Europe, unfortunately. I think, therefore, these two sectors remain very often isolated or not well understood. Well, I guess the problems, the set of problems in both sectors is the same, and a partnership would definitely create much more better results in that aspect. And perhaps one quick comment as well to the previous question on how to build specifically or try to to support and subsidize basically this digital sovereignty in Europe as well. A couple of days ago, I've looked up for the venture funding which went into the cybersecurity space during the last year. And this is pretty much related, because I think a lot of this innovation is not happening just top down from the government to the industry, but also from the industry to the government, right? Being presented as an idea. And last year, there were more than 7.8 billion invested into cybersecurity, and 76% of the spending went to the US companies, 20% to Israel. So 96% of funding, and out of this 96% of funding, 85% of funding was seed funding, so new companies being created that went to these countries, right? And what does it mean for us, right? Having such a scenario, it means that there's definitely a lot of money. Having worked in the financial industry, I can say money finds always, the right company if you present the right problem and if you start to work on this problem very early on. So I guess the challenge here is not really not throwing money on the sector. I think we need really to try to focus on the problem and not the symptoms. So having, first of all, a proper plan how we grow the cyber skills, right? I think there's a clear misalignment between the formal education and the private sector demands in that space. So creating more professorships position, investing more in research. On the other hand, trying to create the demand as well for cybersecurity in Europe, simply because we are lacking very often the awareness and have to learn the hard way before the hacks is happening. And I think that's something where we can also be a bit creative. Bettina Dice, yesterday from Allianz, she was presenting as well the concept of cyber insurances. And I think that could be, for instance, such a tool or instrument to say, hey, let's make cyber insurances mandatory for every company, and by that guarantee a free assessment for the companies who do not have this risk understanding, right, and who understand then that they have to pay more. So creating this demand, creating this market will also help to mature the cybersecurity community. And then in the end, you have, as a final step, just to create the right environment for founders. I think it's still challenging in some of the European countries in terms of taxation and so on for founders who are taking more risk, really to get these benefits from more risks, right? So that's also a problem which remains not just in cyber world, but of course for all the startups and founders in the space. So I think the good news is the money is there and always finds its way. So we have just to focus really on the foundation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Unfortunately, there would be a lot to discuss, but we're at the end of our time and we're now entering into the coffee break. I'm surprised though and excited to see that we're actually having a lot more alignment on those topics of digital sovereignty these days than just a few years ago. We can really see that the discussion has matured quite a lot, that several of the ideas are getting much more concrete, and that we're also getting support from the United States and other countries to develop more sovereignty in Europe. So this, I believe, is also in the spirit of what Wolfgang Ischinger said at the beginning, that more digital sovereignty in Europe is not a situation that creates competition, but rather something that enhances opportunities for cooperation. So in that spirit, I'd also like to thank you, dear panel members, for joining. It was a privilege to have you. Thank you very much. And now everybody enjoy the coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this panel on digital sovereignty. Thank you, Sandro Geiken. Thank you, Robert Kostler, Werner Strasser, Cyril Dujardin, and Sergey Epp. After our short coffee break, I will introduce and hand over to Oliver Roelofs, the co-founder of the Munich Cybersecurity Conference. Hi, hello, and
Hi,
good to have you
Sabine.
here finally.
Yes.
So the stage is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for this kind handover, Sabina. And before we enter the coffee break, I just wanted to highlight again a very, really thrilling initiative which sounds really very promising, and I think also brings more power into the question of digital sovereignty. It's a new network, Ensure Collaborative, which you can see now in the display, a new great network of Europeans or Europe's security makers and safety clusters. Here we see them again, and now let's listen to the great music before we come back after the coffee break.